Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 70 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me is my good friend and colleague on the intersubjective phenomenological highway of life and all things counselling, Mr. Ken Kelly. How you doing, Ken?
I am very well, Rory. I love the words that you use to describe that. Me, I just call it the road of life. It's easier for me to pronounce. We're episode 70, Counselling Tutor Podcast. Great episode for you today. We're going to be starting off speaking about something that's been hotly spoken about within the Facebook group, and that is transcribing of recorded sessions. Often we're called to transcribe a session to be able to submit that for an assignment. We're going to be looking at ways to be able to do that. In Practice Matters today, a really important subject. I want to say the word, I want to say contract here. A really important subject, and that is contracts. And the reason it's so important is I think that it is maybe under-taught in some learning institutions. So we're going to be having a look at that. What can we expect to get out of contracting?
Well, I'm going to talk about a couple of different forms of contracting, a little bit about the history of contracting, and also I'm going to be telling you what should be in a good contract.
Like it. And you know, every single counselling relationship starts with that contract. Without it, you don't have a counselling relationship. So vitally important. And then we're going to be ending today's episode 70, looking at the philosophy of the cognitive approach. That is something worth sticking around from, because that's interesting, isn't it? Behavioural therapy, cognitive, how we think, and looking at the philosophy that underpins that. But starting off episode 70 today, looking at transcribing of sessions, and this is recorded skill sessions that we might have. And why might we need to do this, Rory?
Well, some awarding bodies and some universities want to see a kind of a narrative of a skills recording. So they want to see what's being said, and also they want to see how the person who is the counsellor or playing in the role of helper responds, and the motivations and the reasons behind it. And depending on the assignment, they may also want to know what they would have done differently, or why what they did worked, and if so, how it worked. So that's why people do transcripts of recordings.
Yeah, and I know from looking at our Facebook group, which is where we kind of pick our topics from, and if you're not a member of the Facebook group, get yourself in there. It is a great, rich vein of information, and come and join over 16,000 fellow like-minded students of counselling, psychotherapy. We've got tutors in there, and we've got some qualified therapists who stick around because it's just so awesome in there, and they use the topics and the discussions for their own personal continuing professional development. Come and join us, and you just go to Facebook, put in Counselling Tutor. We're right at the top. We will let you in. We will welcome you in, and come and join our conversations and suggest topics you'd like to hear on the podcast as well. And we took the information from there. There's been long discussions about transcribing. What tools can I use? And I get it, because the last thing you want to do as a student is to be sitting there listening to a recorded session between you and a client and then typing it up word for word. It can be very, very long-winded. And a lot of the questions are around, how can I do this? Are there any easy ways? Are there any shortcuts? Any that come to mind for yourself, Rory?
Well, yeah, one particular shortcut is to be very, very super clear on what the criteria is asking you. In the times that I've asked for transcripts, or the awarding body asked for transcripts, people have copied out literally word for word everything the client said. And it depends on what's being asked. So if it's asking you, for instance, to comment on a part of the session where you felt that you were using skills and how effective they were, then you only need that piece of the transcript to reinforce your learning. It's almost like a quote, I would say.
I like it. That's a great... Yeah. So read the question. Be sure of what is being asked of you. Don't just go and transcribe the whole session from beginning to end and put that in the paper, hoping that somewhere in there is going to be that right answer. Look to the question. You always say it, Rory. You come back to it again and again. Answer the question.
Yeah.
And I guess where I would like to start with transcripts is with the recording itself. There is nothing more disconcerting than when you have had either a simulated session with a peer that you're writing up, or even maybe it might be a actual session where the client has agreed in your contracting, in your placement, that you can use it, and it's been a good session, and you know what you need is in that session for your assignment because you knew what the criteria was, and you go to your recording and you hear and you can't hear what's being said. So my first tip is use a recording device that works, and don't let the time that you find out that the recording device will work or not work be the first time you use it. Do a test with it. And you've got some ideas on recording devices, Rory. I know that you've just bought a brand new one.
Yes, you're right, I have, Ken. And what I'm going to do, for those of you who are going to watch the podcast on YouTube, because we are on YouTube now. So if you go to Counselling Tutor, if you type in Counselling Tutor on YouTube, you'll find our website, but also you'll find our YouTube channel where we have excerpts of the podcast, and we can see us gurning and so for those people, this isn't really good for a podcast, Ken. But, for those of you watching, I'm holding it up. There we go. And I've just bought myself a product called a Zoom H1 recorder. They're about £70, so obviously depends on your budget. But I've just decided this would be the absolute top piece of kit for recording client work. It's unobtrusive is the word, isn't it? Hold it up again. Yes. Super easy to use. You don't need to be a technical person. You just literally press the big red button and the recording starts. It's broadcast quality, so you have no trouble listening to it, and also it's secure. I would say, please don't use your phones. As soon as you put anything, I know people use the phones to record because most modern mobile phones have recording devices in them, but they ain't secure. And you get your phone stolen, you've got stuff in there. And also, I've listened to transcripts done on phones where the phone's rung halfway through the session.
Yeah,
so someone's talking about anyway, bing, 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 bong, or whatever the tune is. Not good. Get yourself a dedicated recorder
like that. And the recorder that Rory was showing there that's the Zoom H1, is it, Rory? There is also a Zoom H2, and if you just go onto Google and put in Zoom ZOOM, you'll see the recorders come up. And the thing that you'll notice when you look at them is that they are not dictaphones. If you think of the old dictaphone going back a few years, where a business person might take up their little device and they would hold it up to their mouth and they'd push the button, the tape would start turning, and then they would say the words that they wanted, maybe the secretary to type up for them, and the secretary would then put that into a dictaphone tape player with the headphones on. Dictaphones are not good for picking up clients' work, and the reason for that is they're meant to be held very close to your mouth. The recorder that Rory was showing is a solid-state recorder, or at least you're recording to a recording device such as a little card or something like that you can take out, that you can transfer to a computer relatively easily. And they're meant for use for live broadcast, as Rory said. News reporters will use such devices, and musicians will use such devices because you can put them down. They're going to pick up the nuance, and specifically if you're talking about counselling, the silence, the deep breath that somebody may take, all of that can be used, and you can be written about if you can hear it and you're able to kind of pinpoint that. So there you go. Good recording device is always good. So you said something really important, Rory, and I think it's worth touching on, and that is the security of the recording. You put it on your phone uploads to an iCloud or something like that is not secure. This is a client's information we're talking about here. In the same way as we keep the confidentiality within the room, and we need to keep the confidentiality of that recording as well. So be really careful, contract and put boundaries in place of how that recording will be used. So if you are maybe using a client's recording from a real session on your placement, let the client know how it will be used, who will be listening to it. So if it's a transcript, you may even say, this will be transcribed and it will be looked at by somebody who is assessing my skills. And of course, you may choose then to say, and of course, your name will be left out. But contract well around how that information is going to be used.
Yeah, and also it is quite unusual, I think, for awarding bodies to ask for actual real clients' transcriptions. It used to be the case, but it's changed a few years ago, certainly the awarding body that I taught. And now the advanced counselling skills are done with peers or maybe someone off another course within the college, just for that reason, because, of course, the awarding bodies store information because they're audited. So your tutor should be making that clear. But it is very useful also for if you're taking your work to a supervisor. But you've got the recording, Ken. What do you do with it? You've got an hour's worth of recording. How do you transcribe it? Well, I would say there's a lot of really good online resources now that you can use, which is why it's super important that you have a high-quality recorder. And one of the ones that's around is called Trint, which is an online resource. You can load it up to Trint and leave it, and you come back and it's interpreted it for you. I have to say it's not verbatim, so it's not word for word. You might have to do some tidying up, but it is a very quick way. And also Dragon. I think there's a software program called Dragon, isn't there?
There is. And I guess the difference between Dragon and Trint is an online service that you will use, and it's got a great benefit to it in that Trint, the actual audio that you upload is not listened to by a human being. It is done via artificial intelligence. It is transcribed robotically. So the confidentiality is preserved. How the confidentiality of the actual upload file is stored, I'm not sure of. You'd have to look at their terms and conditions, and that is TRINT. That is Trint.com. You can go and have a look at that. Dragon is a little more expensive. It is a program also that works robotically, and it is something that you would download, install on your computer, and you can run a sound file through that, and that will, to the best of its ability, transcribe that for you. There are also services such as SpeechPad, where the audio is actually listened to by a human being and they transcribe it for you. And I think here again, we need to look at the confidentiality and the contracting around that, because the person who is listening to that audio file is very likely not going to be keeping the confidentiality of that client. And if they're saying and sharing anything that is real, that is sensitive, that is heavy, there is a chance that may leak out, where the person doing the transcription might say over tea time, "Oh, you'll never guess what I was typing up today." And we need to be mindful of that, of what happens with the person's information when it's no longer in our hands. Trint would be my go-to. It's robotic, and then you can also delete the sound file once you've downloaded it. But like Rory says, you're gonna have to read over it, because it can be. We did one, and Trint changed Carl Rogers to Colonel Rogers, Cole Rogers. I guess it was my pronunciation. Do I sound like I'm saying Colonel Rogers? Cole Rogers.
Oh, Colonel Rogers. Well, that's artificial intelligence for you. So there you go. But yes, and I'll be touching a little bit on contracting. You need to contract for any kind of recording, and you need to be really clear in your contract. Who's going to listen to it? Where's it going to be stored? How long are you going to keep the data for? And I'm going to be covering that in contracting.
Practice matters.
Contracting in counselling. So what is a counselling contract? Well, a counselling contract is an overview of the service a counsellor offers a client. And a basic contract should include the following things, really. What's on offer? So when we talk about what's on offer, a basic contract should really talk about the modality of therapy that you're practicing, so that clients get an idea of what they can work with. Now, the reality of this is very few clients will be that informed. In other words, if you tell them you're a person-centred therapist, they probably won't understand what that is. I usually say to my clients, I give you the space to help you kind of discuss what's going on for you, to feel that you've been heard, and to try and make sense of where you're at. That's the kind of how I put it over, and it seems to work well for me. You'd also talk about how many sessions are offered. So if it's 6 sessions, you'd say we offer 6 sessions. If there's the possibility of an extension, you'd say why it would be extended. So some agencies allow 6 sessions, and then by the practice manager's discretion, you can then add on more sessions if that's what you want, or if that's what the client wants, more to the point. Who you discuss your client work with, really important this. I always say that I have a supervisor that I take my clinical work to. And when I was a student, I had a peer group supervision, which is what you'll be experiencing in your classes. And I always make sure that the client's aware of what that is and also how that is ring-fenced in terms of confidentiality. So what I would say is that in supervision, I don't say who the person is or any details about who they are. It's just really the presenting issues. And the same would go for the peer group. And both of those are bound by a contract of confidentiality. I also talk about who has access to notes. That's really important. And there's a lot of confusion about who can see your notes. So basically, if you work for an agency, the law says that if you work for a company, all the work you do for them in their time belongs to them, which would include the writing of notes. So technically speaking, your agency really owns the notes that you make. However, in practice, they don't usually ask for them. If you store them, if you're allowed to store them externally, they don't usually ask for them. I know a lot of agencies ask you to store them in a locked filing cabinet at the agency, in which case, people can look at them. So you might want to make some inquiries who can see them, who has access to it. The other people who can access your notes are, of course, the clients under the Data Protection Act, a judge with a court order. A lot of people think if the police phone up, our colleagues in the police, that you can just give them the client's notes. The answer to that is you can't. Either you get the client's permission, and if the client doesn't give permission, then our colleagues in the police usually then have to go and get a court order from a judge to access them. So there's that. And also a coroner. In the case of a client dying, the coroner may very well ask for you to hand over your client notes. You'd also talk about the limits of legal confidentiality. I cover the 3 pretty big ones, which are drug trafficking, money laundering, and acts of terrorism. And I've always had that in my contract, and that makes it really, really, really clear what a client chooses to disclose. And of course, if they do disclose, acts of terrorism, drug trafficking, or money laundering, of course, I would not be able to tell them I've disclosed it. I would just have to disclose it, and because of the legal complications of perverting the course of justice, if you tip someone off, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. So yeah, I talk about the legal aspects of confidentiality, and also the limits of agency confidentiality. So here's the thing: in the UK, at the time of making this podcast, there isn't any law that compels a therapist to disclose if a child's being abused. And what's likely to happen is that the agency will have their own policy on this. So when you're working for an agency, you work within the law, and also you work within the agency's policies, and you combine those 2 ingredients into your contract. So the agencies that I've worked at in the past talk about child protection. They also talk about harm to self and harm to others. So you would say, the agency says that if you, because if you say that you might kill yourself, or that you might do harm to others, or if you're working with children, others do harm to you, there is your policy built into your contract. The other thing that should be in a contract is how to access the complaints procedure if something goes wrong. I always make it clear to my clients that I'm a member of the BACP as a independent practitioner. That would be the route to complaint a client would go to if they had a complaint about me. I don't have an agency, I'm an independent practitioner. But if you work for an agency, usually, not exclusively, the route would be complaint to the agency. If it couldn't be resolved, then it would go to the BACP. But there is no barrier to a client going straight to the BACP and not going through the agency. Terms and conditions of payment. So if you are a practicing practitioner and you're qualified and you're taking money, terms and method of payment, if applicable. So you need to, when is the fee paid, by what method is it paid, and also a cancellation policy. Super important that there have been complaints made in the past where clients have been, told that they're being, they've cancelled an appointment and they've got to pay, the counselling fee that they missed, but they've not been told about it in the contract. So that's really, really, really important, cancellation policy. So why is it important to have a contract? Well, if you've been listening to the topics I've covered before, you might be getting the sense of it, but it gives clients the information they need to make an informed choice and to have some power in the counselling relationship. I can't say enough about this really, because in terms of power, you're always trying to balance the power dynamic out between you, self, and your clients. But sometimes it's very, very difficult. And one of the things you'll never really balance out is the fact that they are coming to you because they've got a problem they want to resolve. And that always tips the balance in the counsellor's favour. But one of the ways we can make sure it doesn't tip any further is by having a clear contract. It gives people a sense of agency. It gives them a sense of power. They know what they're getting. So, yes, they should get a copy of the contract, and it really links to the values of autonomy and fairness, both of which are mentioned in the BACP ethical framework. Should the client get a copy of the contract? Absolutely. If you're going to have a contract, give someone a copy of it, and then they can go away and have a look at it. They can, I ask my clients to sign it, and then what I do in the second session, I just gently touch on, I'd say, I wonder if you've looked through the contract, is that okay for you? Just to double check and to give that sense of the importance of, them in the counselling relationship, that they have a choice. Should a contract be written down? Well, in the times we live in, it's good practice to have a written contract, I would say. So both parties are clear and can make reference to it. If a complaint is made to an ethical body, they'd almost certainly ask for a copy of the contract. So, if a complaint's made, the ethical bodies would say, could you send us a copy of your contract? And if you don't have a copy, you're into the territory of he said, or he said, she said, or she said. And it can be very, very difficult. If you have a copy of it and the client's got a copy of it, it's super clear. You can send it off, and that forms the basis of your evidence if a complaint's made against you. Are there any other forms of contracts? Well, actually, yes, there is. Some counsellors have a therapy contract. This is a separate contract. It's usually verbal, where the client outlines what they wish to change and works towards it. Now, therapy contracts are mostly used in transactional analysis because it forms part of the model of therapy, and I'll say just a little bit about that. In some models of TA, there's something called a contractual method, and in fact, Eric Byrne was very keen, the person who invented TA, was very keen on contracts. He believed that you sat a client down, you ask them what they want to change, they work towards it. When it's changed, the contract's finished, the work's done, and then you could say to the client, is there anything else you want to change? And you make another contract. In person-centred therapy, it's not really as cut and dried as that or as formal. However, I usually just gently ask the client, what is it that they're looking to change or to kind of explore in therapy? And that forms the basis of a soft therapeutic contract. It's one that can be returned to, when you're reflecting and paraphrasing, saying, I've noticed that when you first came, you said you wanted to change this, and I'm getting a sense from what you've just said that actually you're doing that. It reminds the client to some extent what they've changed and where they're working towards. So that is contracts.
Thank you as always, Rory. Contracting, super, super important. It was really interesting. I remember we did something on contracting recently. In fact, we did a lecture. There's a lecture in the Counselling Study resource, if you remember, on contracting. And when we kind of put the topic out there, we were asking people what their experience with contracting was and how they covered that in their college or learning institution, their university. And so many people were saying that it wasn't something they covered in any great depth, but it is so important. Every single counselling transaction starts with that contract. And the thing that occurs to me, Rory, is that if ever you run into a problem and a complaint is laid, the very first thing that the BACP would do is say, could we see your contract, please? The very first thing that your insurer is going to say is, can we see your contract, please? Really good. So if you want to get Rory's super duper handout, bullet points, all of the stuff that he covered there, you can do so by going to counsellingtutor.com. That's our website. Lots of information there. When you get to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, go to episode 70. That's today's podcast, and you will find all the show notes from today's episode, including that download of Rory's. And of course, if you're already a member of Counselling Study Resource, just log into your CSR dashboard and you can get that download from your handouts vault. It's already been uploaded for you. So moving on, and we got a question that's come in from Facebook around the philosophy of the cognitive approach, Rory.
Yes, it's from one of our members, Joe Leather. And if you're wondering what's all this Facebook, we have a wonderful, vibrant community of students in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, some tutors, some qualified colleagues, all who populate our wonderful Facebook group. Over 16,000 people in there now. And if you want to join, just go into Facebook, type Counselling Tutor. You might find our business page. If you do, and you like what we do, give us a 5-star review. That'd be lovely. But also you'll find our close Facebook group page. Knock on the door. Of course, we're going to let you in. And you can join the party with lots and lots of students like you who are looking to get some handle on theory or to understand the theory better. And this is just a case in point. Joe Leather writes in the Facebook group, trying to source a quote from Albert Ellis for an assignment. People don't just get upset, they contribute to their upsetness. Does anyone know of an original citable source? Thanks in advance. Well, Joe Leather, I think I may be able to help you out here. I've never come across that particular quote, but it was well known that Albert Ellis, now Albert Ellis was really the father of cognitive behavioural therapy. Of course, Aaron Beck developed it, but Ellis developed REBT, or RET at the time, rational emotive behavioural therapy, which is a form of CBT. And he was influenced, as a lot of cognitive developers of CBT were, by the work of the Stoic philosophers. And the Stoic philosophers basically said that you've got to be stoic, you've got to put up with your lot, you've got to straighten your back. That was the narrative. And the quote I think that you're searching for, Joe, is men are disturbed not by things, but the view they take of them. And that was, of course, a Stoic quote. And it appears in the Enchiridion, which was written by Arrian, also known, and these are the best names, Lucas Flavius Arrhenius.
Love it. Oh, Lucas Flavius. What? Sounds like a make of crisp.
He's a make crisp. And he was a student of Epictetus, who was a Greek philosopher. And Stoicism is effectively being kind of brave and understanding your lot. There's a great quote from Marcus Aurelius, who was a Greek slave, who used to do a lot of wrestling in those times. They were very keen on wrestling. And he was saying to his master, if you pull my leg that way, you'll break it. And the guy pulled it and he broke his leg. And he said, I told you to do that.
Wow.
And that's being stoic. He said, yeah, I told you. So yes, it comes from Stoicism. And indeed, Ellis was very keen on that, about thinking about not just our perception of things, but at the actual thing itself. So we get from that the action, belief, and consequence. Something happens, we form a belief of that, which could be faulty, could be incorrect, but because of that incorrect, we then live our lives to it and the consequences of it. Action, belief, and consequence. So yes, Marcus Aurelius, the Enchiridion, and Arrian Lucas Flavius Arrhenius.
Oh, I love that name.
Isn't it?
Flavius. I can see that being written down right now for those assignments. It's always interested me, the cognitive approach, and looking, I mean, cognitive is in the head. It's how you think, and I guess it differs from person-centered, where we might say, how do you feel? And it almost feels like that lives in a different place, and it depends who you are. I've spoken to people and clients and students who've said that they feel in their head as well. For me personally, I feel in my chest. Some people report feeling in their tummy, but cognitively it's about how we think. And if we look at the world, at least the Western world, and at least the Western world, how I perceive it, it's very behavioral based, where behavior is rewarded if it is considered good, or you've done well, you've got good marks in your assignment, really well done, we're going to clap hands. In schools they will split off the good behaved children and give them a treat at the end of each year, whereas if you don't behave as is required, then it's the stick, isn't it? It's the stick and carrot, Rory, and it's just effective, I guess, we see it played out around us.
We do, yeah. We're moving really from cognitive behavioural therapy to behaviourism. There is a difference. And what you're alluding to, Ken, is what's called a token economy, where you reward people for doing the right thing and punish people for doing the bad thing. And usually, I know in secondary schools, if you behave yourself, you can go to the prom, and if you don't, you can't.
Exactly that. But the point is, I mean, when we're looking at cognitive behavioral therapy and bringing that into therapy and taking it a little bit away from the carrot and stick of the world, behavior is modifiable through cognitive processes, through thinking. You can modify the behaviors of the person, and I guess CBT is your cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitively challenging the faulty belief, kind of reprogramming that so you have a different outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, the shorthand really is we don't let our emotions rule our lives. You know, the thinking is the top part of it. You know, because if that happened, we would just be in a sea of kind of emotional. We'd be in an emotional mire. Yes, there are a place for emotions, but we have to think rationally sometimes. I wouldn't want to drive a car just on my emotions. I can tell you that.
But a great question. I always like looking at the philosophy and where things come from. It's interesting how far you can trace those roots back to old Mr. Flavorous Crisp, or what was it?
Come on, Ken. Come on, get with your Greek stuff. Lucius Flavius Arrhenius.
You see, this is, Rory, why you are the academic director and I work on the technical side of things. So I think we're best suited for what we do. And when I work on the technical side of things, such as building the websites and making sure it all runs smoothly, I always have a nice packet of Flavorous Crisps. I do indeed, Rory. There you go. That is episode 70, well and truly with tongue in cheek. Started off by looking at transcribing of sessions, what we need to consider around that with regards to the confidentiality of those clients and the contracting of that, and then led beautifully into practice matters, where Rory actually looked at contracting, the different kinds of contracts, and then of course we look at the philosophy of the cognitive approach, where we looked at the roots of that, and then I certainly had a good giggle there as well, Rory.
Yes. Well, you know, there's always room for a bit of humour in counselling. Lucius Flavius Arrhenius may very well have experienced. So with that, as always, we come to the end of this episode, and stay grounded and definitely stay safe.
If you enjoy the topics and handouts here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, then you will love the Counselling Study Resource. CSR was built by myself, Ken, and Rory Lees-Oakes to give you the support you need during your counselling studies. So get access to the world's most comprehensive collection of resources aimed at supporting you in your journey to become a counsellor. Take the stress out of your studies by visiting counsellingtutor.com/CSR. That's counsellingtutor.com/CSR.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.